The blizzard howled through the mountain pass with a fury that seemed to tear at the very fabric of the world, and there, in the swirling white chaos, Gregory Roberts saw her. She was on her knees in the snow, her thin dress already crusted with ice, her dark hair whipping across a face that spoke of desperation so profound it stopped him cold. Her hands were pressed together in supplication, not to God, but to the merciless wind itself, as if the storm might take pity where humanity had failed. "Please," she whispered, though her voice was lost in the wind, "please just let me find somewhere warm, just for tonight." The words were barely audible, more breath than sound, but Gregory caught them as he approached on horseback, his own coat heavy with snow, his beard thick with ice. He had been riding these mountains for 15 years, had seen storms that could kill a man in minutes, but he had never seen anything quite like this fragile figure, kneeling in the path of certain death. Julie Patel looked up as the horse's hooves crunched through the snow beside her, and for a moment, she thought she might be hallucinating. The man above her was tall and broad, wrapped in a heavy coat that spoke of warmth and security. His eyes, dark and serious beneath heavy brows, studied her with an intensity that made her want to shrink away, but she had nowhere left to go. "You'll freeze to death out here," Gregory said, his voice cutting through the wind with surprising gentleness. He dismounted and approached her slowly. "How long have you been walking?" Julie tried to answer, but her teeth were chattering so violently that the words came out as fragments. "Three. 3 days. Maybe 4. I lost count." She attempted to stand, but her legs buckled beneath her, and she fell back to her knees with a soft crumb. Without hesitation, Gregory reached down and lifted her into his arms, surprised by how light she felt. She was nothing but skin and bones beneath the thin fabric of her dress, and he could feel the violent shivering that racked her entire body. "We need to get you warm," he said, carrying her toward his horse. "There's a cabin about a mile up the ridge." As he settled her in front of him on the saddle, wrapping his heavy coat around both of them, Julie felt the first warmth she had known in days seeping into her bones. Exhaustion was pulling her under like a tide, and she found herself leaning back against his solid chest, letting his strength hold her upright as they rode through the storm. Before we see how this ends, tell us where you're watching from and hype this video in the comments. The cabin appeared through the swirling snow like something from a dream, its windows glowing with warm yellow light, smoke rising from the chimney to be torn away by the wind. Gregory had built it himself 5 years ago, after he had made his fortune in the silver mines, and decided that solitude was preferable to the company of men who measured worth only in dollars and cents. He carried Julie inside, kicking the door shut behind them, and the sudden absence of wind felt like stepping into another world. The main room was dominated by a stone fireplace where logs crackled and sparked, casting dancing shadows on the rough-hewn walls. "Sit here," Gregory said, settling her into a chair beside the fire. "I need to get you out of those wet clothes before hypothermia sets in." He moved with practiced efficiency, pulling blankets from a chest and setting a kettle on the wood-burning stove. "There's a room upstairs where you can change." Julie nodded, though she wasn't sure she had the strength to climb the stairs. Her fingers were so numb she couldn't feel them, and her feet felt like blocks of ice inside her thin boots. As Gregory rummaged through a trunk, she tried to process what was happening. This morning she had been certain she was going to die in the snow, and now she was sitting beside a warm fire in a stranger's cabin. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice still shaky from the cold. Gregory paused in his search and looked at her over his shoulder. "Gregory Roberts. I own the silver mine about 10 miles north of here." He pulled out a thick sweater. "And you are?" "Julie," she said, then hesitated. There had been a time when she would have given her full name with pride, when being Julie Patel had meant something in the world. But that was before her father's business had failed, before the debts had mounted, before she had been forced to flee in the night. "Just Julie." Gregory nodded, accepting the abbreviated introduction without question. He had learned long ago that people came to the mountains for many reasons, and most of them preferred to leave their past lives buried under the snow. "Well, just Julie, you need to get warm before we worry about anything else." She tried to stand again, and this time managed to stay upright, though she had to grip the back of the chair for support. Gregory was beside her in an instant, offering his arm, and together they climbed the narrow stairs to the loft above. I'll be downstairs, Gregory said, setting dry clothes on the bed. Take your time. He paused at the top of the stairs. Julie, I don't know what brought you out into that storm, but you're safe now. Whatever you're running from, it can't reach you here. After he left, Julie sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the simple kindness of his words. It had been so long since anyone had offered her safety, had spoken to her with such gentle concern. She changed into the dry clothes, marveling at the softness of the wool against her skin. The shirt was far too large for her, but it smelled of cedar and wood smoke and something indefinably masculine that made her feel protected. When she came back downstairs, Gregory was stirring something in a pot over the fire, and the smell that filled the cabin made her stomach clench with sudden, desperate hunger. Venison stew, he said without looking up. Eat slowly. Your stomach needs time to adjust. Julie took the bowl with hands that were finally beginning to feel human again, and the first spoonful of the hot stew nearly brought tears to her eyes. She couldn't remember the last time she had eaten a proper meal. Thank you, she said between careful spoonfuls. I don't know how to repay you for this. Gregory settled into the chair across from her. You don't need to repay anything. This is what people do for each other in the mountains. He studied her face in the firelight. Where are you trying to get to, walking in weather like that? Julie hesitated, the spoon halfway to her mouth. She had been running for so long that the truth felt foreign on her tongue, but something about Gregory's steady presence made her want to trust him. I was trying to reach Denver, she said finally. I heard there might be work there. I had enough money for the stagecoach, but it broke down 2 days out of Leadville. I couldn't afford to wait in town, and I thought I could walk the rest of the way. Gregory set down his bowl, his expression grave. Julie, it's 60 miles from Leadville to Denver through some of the most dangerous mountain passes in Colorado. In a blizzard like this, you would have died out there, probably within hours. The simple statement hit her like a physical blow, because she knew he was right. I didn't have a choice, she said quietly. I couldn't stay in Leadville. There were people there who were looking for me. Gregory leaned forward. What kind of people? Julie's hands tightened on the bowl. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. My father owed money to some very dangerous men. When he died, they decided that his debts had passed to me. She looked up, meeting Gregory's eyes. They gave me a choice. I could work off the debt in one of their establishments, or I could marry one of their associates. I chose to run. The silence that followed her confession was heavy with unspoken understanding. Gregory had seen enough of the world to know what kind of establishments she was talking about. How much did your father owe? He asked quietly. $800. The amount seemed enormous to Julie. With interest, they said it would be closer to $1,200 by now. Gregory was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. $1,200 was less than he made in a month from his mining operation. These men, do they know where you went? Julie shook her head. I don't think so. I left in the middle of the night, told one where I was going, but they have connections throughout the territory. Gregory stood and walked to the window, peering out into the storm. The snow was falling even harder now. No one would be traveling in weather like this, which meant they were safe for now. You can stay here as long as you need to, he said, turning back to face her. The storm will probably last another day or two, and after that, we'll figure out what to do next. Julie felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. I can't ask you to put yourself in danger for my sake. Let me worry about that, Gregory said, his voice carrying a quiet authority. I've been taking care of myself in these mountains for a long time. A few thugs from the city don't scare me. As the evening wore on, they sat by the fire, talking in the comfortable way of two people who had found themselves thrown together by circumstance. Gregory told her about his years in the mines, about the silver strike that had made his fortune. Julie found herself sharing stories of her childhood, of the father who had raised her alone after her mother's death. He was a good man, she said, staring into the flames. He just trusted the wrong people. Made investments that seemed sound, but turned out to be schemes. She pulled the borrowed sweater tighter around herself. The stress of it killed him within a year. Gregory watched the play of firelight across her face. What did you do before all this happened? I helped my father with his business. He had a small shipping company. I kept the books, handled correspondence, sometimes even negotiated contracts. A bitter smile crossed her lips. Turns out those skills aren't much in demand when you're a woman alone with no references and no money. They are if you're working for the right person, Gregory said quietly. Julie looked at him sharply, but before she could ask what he meant, a gust of wind rattled the windows. The storm was intensifying. We should get some sleep, he said, standing and banking the fire. Tomorrow we'll need to assess the damage and see how much snow we're dealing with. He showed her to the loft, bringing up extra blankets. As he turned to go back downstairs, Julie caught his arm. Gregory, she said, her voice soft in the darkness. Thank you. Not just for the shelter and the food, but for treating me like a person, like someone worth saving. He covered her hand with his own. Everyone is worth saving, Julie. The world just forgets that sometimes. She woke the next morning to the sound of silence. The wind had died during the night, and pale sunlight was filtering through the small window. She dressed quickly and made her way downstairs to find him already up, coffee brewing and bacon sizzling in a cast-iron pan. How much snow? She asked, moving to the window and gasping at what she saw. The world outside had been transformed, with drifts piled as high as the windowsills. About 3 feet in the level areas, Gregory said. The drifts are deeper. It'll be at least a day before the main roads are passable. Julie felt a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. Part of her was grateful for the reprieve, but another part knew that every day she stayed put Gregory in greater danger. I should go, she said quietly. As soon as the roads are clear, I should continue to Denver. Gregory turned to look at her. With what money? What plan? His voice was gentle but direct. Julie, you barely survived 3 days on the trail. Denver is still 50 miles away through country that's even more remote than this. And even if you make it, then what? The truth of his words hit her like a physical blow because she had been trying not to think about exactly those questions. Then what do you suggest? She asked, sinking into the chair by the fire. Gregory poured coffee into 2 cups and handed her one. I have a proposition for you when we say OS he said, settling into the chair across from her. My mining operation is successful, but it's also complicated. I need someone to handle the business side of things, someone who can keep books, manage correspondence, deal with suppliers and buyers. Julie stared at him over the rim of her coffee cup. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a partnership, Gregory said. 20% of the profits in exchange for handling all the administrative work. It's not charity, Julie. I genuinely need help, and you have exactly the skills I'm looking for. The offer was so generous, so unexpected, that Julie felt tears spring to her eyes. I don't understand. You barely know me. How can you trust me with something like that? Gregory was quiet for a long moment. Yesterday, when I found you in the snow, you could have made up any story to gain my sympathy. Instead, you told me the truth, even though it made you vulnerable. That tells me more about your character than any reference letter ever could. Julie set down her coffee cup with trembling hands. What about the men who are looking for me? Then we'll deal with them when the time comes, Gregory said simply. But Julie, this isn't just about hiding from your past. This is about building a future. My mine produces more silver in a month than most men see in a lifetime. 20% of that is enough to make you independent. The idea of financial independence was so intoxicating that Julie felt dizzy. But years of disappointment had taught her to be cautious. What's the catch? Gregory smiled. The catch is that it's hard work. The mine operates year-round, which means dealing with suppliers and buyers in all kinds of weather. And living up here means isolation. Julie looked around the simple cabin, at the warm fire and the solid walls that had sheltered her from the storm. When would I start? Today, if you want, Gregory said. He walked to a desk in the corner, returning with a thick leather-bound book. This is last month's production report. Take a look and tell me what you think. Julie opened the ledger and, despite everything she had been through, felt a familiar thrill at the neat columns of figures. It had been so long since she had been able to use her mind for something other than survival. Your extraction costs are higher than they should be, she said after a few minutes of study. You're paying premium prices for equipment that you could get for half the cost if you bought direct from the manufacturer. Gregory leaned forward, interested. How much could we save? Julie ran her finger down a column of figures. Based on these numbers, probably 15% on your total operating costs. Maybe 20% if we can negotiate better terms with the refiners. She looked up to find him watching her with satisfaction. You already knew that, didn't you? I suspected it, Gregory admitted, but I needed to be sure you could see it too. Julie, you have a head for business that most men would envy. As the day wore on, Julie found herself drawn deeper into the complexities of Gregory's operation. The mine was more than just a hole in the ground. It was a sophisticated enterprise that required coordination with suppliers across 3 states. The biggest challenge, Gregory explained, is timing. Silver prices can change by the day. Knowing when to sell and when to hold can make the difference between a good month and a great one. Julie studied the market reports he showed her. It's like a chess game, she said. You have to think several moves ahead. Exactly, Gregory said. And right now I'm playing that game while also managing every other aspect of the operation. As evening approached, they worked together to prepare dinner, moving around the small kitchen with surprising ease. When Gregory asked her opinion on a contract negotiation, she felt a surge of pride at being treated as an equal. I have one more question, Julie said as they sat down to eat. Why are you really doing this? Gregory was quiet for a long moment. Do you want the honest answer? Always. He set down his fork and looked directly at her. Because when I found you in that snow, kneeling and begging for mercy from a storm that had no mercy to give, it reminded me of something I'd forgotten. That there are people in this world who deserve better than what they've been given. Julie felt her throat tighten with emotion. And you think I deserve better? I think you deserve the chance to find out what you're truly capable of, Gregory said. I think you deserve to never have to kneel to anyone again. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. I think you deserve to discover just how strong you really are. The next morning dawned clear and cold, with sunlight sparkling off the snow like scattered diamonds. Julie woke to the sound of Gregory moving around downstairs, and when she joined him, she found him dressed in heavy boots and a thick coat. I need to check the mine, he explained. Make sure the storm didn't cause any damage. It'll take most of the day. He handed her a cup of coffee. I thought you might want to spend the time going through the rest of the business records. Julie nodded, already eager to dive deeper into the complexities of the mining business. Is it safe for you to go alone? Gregory smiled at the concern in her voice. I've been working these mountains for 15 years. The mine is only about 3 miles from here, and the weather is clear. He paused at the door, his expression growing serious. Julie, while I'm gone, I want you to think about something. This partnership I'm offering you, it's not just a business arrangement. If you accept it, you'll be making enemies of the men who are hunting you. The soberness of his words sent a chill through us when, what are you saying? I'm saying that sooner or later they'll find you, and when they do, you'll have to decide whether you're going to run again or stand and fight. His eyes were steady on hers. If you choose to fight, you won't be fighting alone. After he left, Julie settled at the desk with the ledgers, but Gregory's words kept echoing in her mind. She had spent so many months running that the idea of standing and fighting seemed almost foreign. But as she worked through the morning, she began to feel something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. The mining operation was even more extensive than she had initially realized. Gregory owned not just the main silver mine, but also several smaller claims throughout the region. The scope of it was breathtaking, and the profit margins were substantial enough to make her 20% share a genuine fortune. She was deep in analysis when she heard the sound of horses approaching. Her blood turned to ice. She realized that Gregory had left on foot, which meant these visitors were someone else entirely. Moving carefully to the window, she peered through the glass and felt her worst fears confirmed. 3 men on horseback were making their way up the trail, and even at a distance, she recognized the lead rider. Marcus Wheeler was one of the men her father had owed money to, a thin, sharp-faced man with cold eyes and a reputation for violence. Julie's first instinct was to run, but something stopped her. Maybe it was Gregory's words about standing and fighting, or maybe it was the realization that running had brought her nothing but misery. Whatever it was, she found herself standing straighter, her chin lifting with determination. She was still afraid, terrified actually, but underneath the fear was something else. Anger. Anger at men who thought they could own her because of her father's debts. Anger at a world that gave her so few choices. The sound of boots on the wooden steps made her heart race. But she forced herself to remain calm as Marcus Wheeler's voice called out, "We know you're in there, Julie. Come on out and let's talk about this like civilized people." Julie moved to stand behind the heavy wooden door. "I have nothing to say to you, Mr. Wheeler. You have no legal claim on me." Wheeler's laugh was cold and unpleasant. "Legal claim? Girl, your daddy signed papers that made you collateral on his debts." The door handle rattled as he tried it. "Now you can come out on your own, or my boys here can come in and get you." "My father never signed any such papers," Julie said, though her voice shook slightly. "Maybe not in a courtroom," Wheeler said, "but we're a long way from any courtroom up here. Open this door, Julie, or we'll open it for you." Julie looked around desperately, searching for anything that might serve as a weapon. Her eyes fell on the heavy iron poker beside the fireplace, and she grabbed it. "If you try to break down that door, I'll defend myself." Wheeler's voice carried amusement now. "With what? You're a slip of a girl with no one to help you." "I don't owe you anything," Julie said, moving closer to the door. "My father's debts died with him." "That's not how we do business," Wheeler said. The sound of splintering wood suggested that one of his men had started working on the door with an axe. "Last chance, Julie." Julie gripped the poker tighter. She thought of Gregory's words, about standing and fighting, about never having to kneel again. "Then you'll have to drag me," she said, her voice carrying a strength that surprised even her, "because I will never willingly go with you." The axe bit into the door again, and Julie positioned herself where she would have the best angle to swing the poker. Her heart was pounding, but her hands were steady, and her resolve was absolute. The door burst open just as she heard the sound of a horse approaching at a gallop. Wheeler's men rushed through the doorway, and Julie swung the poker with all her strength, catching the first man across the shoulder and sending him stumbling backward. The second man lunged for her, but she managed to dance away. "Feisty little thing, isn't she?" Wheeler said from the doorway. "I like that." Julie felt a surge of revulsion at his words, but before she could respond, Gregory's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Get away from her!" Wheeler spun around to find Gregory standing in the doorway behind him, and Julie's heart leaped with relief and terror. Gregory was armed only with a rifle, while Wheeler and his men had pistols. "Well," Wheeler said, his hand moving toward the gun at his hip. "The mountain man decides to play hero. This doesn't concern you, friend." Gregory stepped into the cabin, his rifle held ready. "The lady doesn't seem to agree that she belongs to you." "The lady doesn't have a choice in the matter," Wheeler said. "Her daddy signed papers making her collateral on a legitimate debt." "Show me the papers," Gregory said calmly. Wheeler's eyes narrowed. "I don't have to show you anything. If you have legal documents establishing a claim, you should be able to produce them," Gregory continued. "If you can't, then you're just three men threatening a woman, and that's something I can't allow." Julie watched the exchange with growing hope. Gregory was outnumbered and outgunned, but there was something in his calm confidence that suggested he was not as helpless as he appeared. "You're making a mistake, mountain man," Wheeler said. "Walk away now and we'll forget you were ever here." "Her father died of illness," like Gregory said. "Are you confessing to murder, Mr. Wheeler?" Wheeler's face flushed with anger. "I'm not confessing to anything." "But accidents happen in these mountains." "That's true," Gregory agreed. "But then again, I'm not just any man. I'm Gregory Roberts. I own the largest silver mine in this part of Colorado, and I employ about 60 men who are very loyal to me." Julie saw Wheeler's confidence waver slightly at the mention of Gregory's name and the implicit threat of his mining crew. 60 men or 600, it doesn't matter if they're not here, Wheeler said, his hand finally closing around the grip of his pistol. "Actually," Gregory said, and Julie heard the sound of boots on the porch behind Wheeler. "They are here." Wheeler spun around to find himself facing four men in heavy coats, all armed with rifles, all with the hard, weathered faces of men who had spent their lives working dangerous jobs. "Boss," one of them said, touching his hat brim in greeting to Gregory, "thought you might need some help up here." Wheeler looked around the cabin, suddenly realizing that his position had gone from advantageous to hopeless. He was outnumbered more than 2 to 1. "This is a private matter," Wheeler said, but his voice lacked confidence. "Doesn't look like much of a dispute to me," the miner said. "Looks like 3 men threatening a woman. That's not the kind of business we tolerate in these parts." Gregory stepped forward, his rifle now aimed directly at Wheeler's chest. "Mr. Wheeler, you and your men are going to leave now. You're going to forget that Julie Patel exists, because she's under my protection now." Wheeler's eyes darted around the cabin, looking for any avenue of escape. "This isn't over," he said finally. "The girl owes money, and that debt doesn't just disappear." "The debt is paid," Gregory said quietly, and Julie gasped in surprise. $1,200 plus interest. I'll have a bank draft sent to your office in Denver within the week." Wheeler stared at him in shock. "You're paying her debt?" "I'm paying what she supposedly owes," Gregory corrected. "Though I suspect that when lawyers look into the matter, they'll find that the debt was never legally enforceable to begin with." Julie felt tears spring into her eyes at the casual way Gregory had just freed her from the burden that had been crushing her for months. Wheeler looked like he wanted to argue, but the rifles pointed at him made it clear that the discussion was over. "This is a mistake," he said as he backed toward the door. "I know exactly what kind of woman I'm protecting," Gregory said. "The kind of woman who would rather face death in a blizzard than submit to threats and intimidation." Wheeler and his men retreated to their horses, muttering threats, but they were clearly beaten. As they rode away, Julie sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the sudden reversal of her fortunes. "Thank you," she said to Gregory, her voice thick with emotion. Gregory dismissed his men with nods of gratitude, then turned to Julie with a smile. "You don't need to repay me. Consider it an investment in my new business partner." Julie looked up at him through tears. "Business partner?" "That offer I made you yesterday is still open," Gregory said, settling into the chair across from her. 20% of the profits in exchange for handling the administrative side of the operation. And now that your past is settled, you can focus on building a future." Julie wiped her eyes, trying to process everything that had just happened. In the space of a few minutes, she had gone from being a hunted woman with no options to a free person with a genuine opportunity for independence and prosperity. "Why, she asked quietly. "Why would you do all this for someone you barely know?" Gregory was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window. "Do you remember what you were doing when I found you in that storm?" Julie nodded, the memory still vivid and painful. "I was kneeling in the snow, begging." "You were begging the storm for mercy," Gregory said. "But storms don't have mercy, Julie. Only people do. And sometimes when we have the power to lift someone up, we have an obligation to do it." He looked at her directly. "You'll never have to kneel again. Not to storms, not to men like Wheeler, not to anyone. That's a promise." The simple sincerity of his words hit Julie like a physical blow, and she found herself crying again. But this time the tears were not from fear or desperation, but from relief and gratitude, and something that might have been hope. "I accept," she said, her voice steady despite her tears. "I accept your partnership offer, and I promise you won't regret it." Gregory smiled. "I don't think I will. Now shall we get back to work? Those ledgers aren't going to balance themselves." As the days turned into weeks, Julie threw herself into learning every aspect of Gregory's mining operation. She studied market reports until she could predict price fluctuations with uncanny accuracy, negotiated with suppliers until she had reduced operating costs by nearly 25%, and reorganized the entire administrative system. But more than that, she began to discover parts of herself that she had never known existed. Working alongside Gregory, she found that she had a natural instinct for business strategy, an ability to see patterns and opportunities that others missed. "You're a natural at this," Gregory told her one evening as they went over the monthly profit reports. "I've never seen anyone pick it up as quickly as you have. Julie looked up from the ledger she had been studying, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. I had a good teacher, and I was motivated. Motivated by what? By the promise you made me, Julie said quietly, that I would never have to kneel again. Every time I negotiate a better deal, every time I solve a problem, I'm honoring that promise. Gregory reached across the table and covered her hand with his, and Julie felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire crackling in the fireplace. Over the weeks they had worked together, their relationship had deepened from simple partnership to something that neither of them had quite been willing to name. Julie, Gregory said, his voice soft in the lamplight. There's something I need to tell you. She looked up at him, her heart suddenly beating faster. What is it? When I found you in that storm, it wasn't just pity that made me stop. It was recognition. Gregory's thumb traced across her knuckles. I saw someone who had been brought low by circumstances beyond their control, someone who deserved better. But I also saw strength, Julie. Even in your desperation, you never gave up. Julie felt her throat tighten with emotion. I felt like I was giving up. But you weren't, Gregory said firmly. You were in that storm because you chose to risk death rather than submit to degradation. That's not surrender, Julie. That's the bravest thing I've ever seen anyone do. The sincerity in his voice made Julie's chest tight with feelings she had been trying to suppress for weeks. Gregory, what are you saying? I'm saying that somewhere along the way, this stopped being just about business for me, Gregory said. I'm saying that I care about you, Julie. More than I should, probably. Julie felt her heart racing as she looked into his eyes, seeing there the same feelings that had been growing in her own heart. And what if I told you that it stopped being just about business for me, too? Gregory's hand tightened on hers. Then I'd ask you if you think it's possible for two people to build something together that's bigger than either of them could create alone. Julie smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. I think I'd like to find out. Spring came to the mountains with a rush of melting snow and blooming wildflowers, and with it came the busiest season of the mining year. Julie threw herself into the work with an energy that impressed everyone who worked with her. You're trying to prove something, Gregory said one evening as they sat on the cabin's porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. Julie looked up from the correspondence she had been reviewing. What do you mean? You work harder than anyone else. You take on more responsibility than you need to. Gregory's voice was gentle but concerned. It's like you're trying to prove that you deserve to be here. Julie set down the letters and leaned back in her chair. Maybe I am. Maybe I need to prove to myself that I'm not just someone you took pity on. Julie, Gregory said, reaching over to take her hand, you've increased our profits by 30% in 6 months. You've streamlined operations and earned the respect of every person we do business with. What more proof do you need? Julie was quiet for a long moment. Do you remember what I was like when you found me? Desperate, broken, willing to beg a storm for mercy? She turned to look at him directly. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, and for just a moment, I forget where I am. I forget that I'm safe, and I'm terrified that if I don't work hard enough, I'll end up back there. Gregory stood and pulled her to her feet, wrapping his arms around her. You will never be back there, he said firmly. That woman is gone, Julie. She died in that blizzard, and someone stronger took her place. Julie leaned into his embrace. How can you be so sure? Because I've watched you transform over these past months, Gregory said. I've seen you face down suppliers who tried to cheat us, negotiate deals that seemed impossible. The woman I found in the snow could never have done those things. Julie pulled back to look at him, and in the starlight, she could see the love and admiration in his eyes. And what about us? Where does that fit into all of this? Gregory cupped her face in his hands. It fits wherever you want it to fit. We can keep it separate from the business if that makes you more comfortable, or we can let it be part of everything we're building together. The choice is yours, Julie. The emphasis he placed on those last words reminded Julie of how different Gregory was from every other man she had ever known. He had never tried to pressure her, never made her feel like she owed him more than what they had agreed upon. I want it to be part of everything, she said quietly. I want to build something with you that includes business and partnership and love. Gregory's smile was radiant in the starlight as he leaned down to kiss her, and Julie felt the last of her fears and doubts melt away. The summer passed in a blur of hard work and growing prosperity, but also of quiet moments stolen between the demands of business. By autumn, their partnership had evolved into something that encompassed every aspect of their lives. It was on a crisp October morning, as they were reviewing the quarterly reports, that Gregory brought up the subject that had been on both their minds for weeks. Julie, he said, setting down his coffee cup, there's something I want to ask you. Julie looked up from the ledger, her heart beginning to race at the seriousness in his tone. What is it? Gregory stood and walked to the window, looking out at the mountains. We've built something remarkable together. A business that's more successful than I ever imagined. A partnership that works on every level, but more than that, we've built a life together. He turned back to face her. I love you, Julie. I want to spend the rest of my life building something with you that's even bigger and more beautiful than what we've created so far. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I'm asking if you'll marry me. Julie stared at the box in his hands, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was offering. Marriage to Gregory would mean more than just love and companionship. It would mean true partnership in every sense of the word. Yes, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Gregory, I'll marry you. Gregory's face lit up with joy as he opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant ring. As he slipped it onto her finger, Julie felt the last piece of her transformation click into place. She was no longer the desperate woman who had knelt in the snow. She was Julie Patel Roberts, successful businesswoman, equal partner in one of Colorado's most profitable mining operations, and wife to a man who valued her mind as much as her heart. The wedding took place on a crisp December morning, exactly 1 year after Gregory had found Julie in the blizzard. They had chosen the date deliberately, wanting to mark the anniversary of the day that had changed both their lives forever. As they exchanged vows, Julie found herself thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. A year ago, she had been a woman with no options, no future, no hope. Now she was standing beside a man who loved and respected her, embarking on a life that promised adventure and prosperity. I promise to stand beside you as an equal partner in everything we build together, Gregory said. I promise to support your dreams and ambitions, and to never forget that the strongest foundations are built by two people working together. Julie's own vows were equally heartfelt. I promise to bring all of my strength and skill to our partnership, to face whatever challenges come our way with courage and determination, and to never forget that the greatest gift you gave me was not shelter from the storm, but the belief that I was strong enough to weather any storm on my own. After the ceremony, Gregory and Julie stepped outside onto the porch, wanting a moment alone. Any regrets? Gregory asked, wrapping his arms around her. Julie leaned back against his chest. Only one, she said. Gregory tensed slightly. What's that? Julie smiled, turning in his arms to face him. I regret that it took me so long to realize that sometimes the best things in life come from the worst moments. If I hadn't been desperate enough to walk into that blizzard, I never would have found you. Gregory's kiss was soft and warm, tasting of promise and hope. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. So what happens now? Now we keep building, Julie said. We expand the mining operation, maybe look into other investments. We travel, see the world beyond these mountains. She paused. And maybe, if you want, we start a family of our own. Julie felt a warmth spread through her chest at the idea of children, of raising them in this place of beauty and security. I'd like that, she said. All of it. Then that's what we'll do, Gregory said simply. Together. As their first year of marriage progressed, Julie threw herself into expanding their operations with the same determination she had brought to learning the business. She identified new opportunities for growth, negotiated partnerships with other mining operations, and began developing a network of contacts. It was during one of their quiet evenings that Julie brought up an idea that had been growing in her mind. Gregory, she said, setting down the blueprints she had been studying, what would you think about starting a fund to help other women who find themselves in situations like I was in? Gregory looked up, intrigued. What kind of fund? Something that could provide emergency assistance, help with legal fees, maybe even seed money for women who want to start their own businesses. Julie's voice grew more animated. There are so many women out there who are trapped by circumstances. We could give them the same kind of chance you gave me. Gregory smiled, recognizing the passion in her voice. How would it work? Julie had clearly thought this through carefully. We could start with a percentage of our profits. I could handle the administration, screen applicants, make sure the money goes to women who will use it wisely. It sounds like a wonderful idea, Gregory said. But are you sure you want to take on that kind of additional responsibility? Julie stood and walked to the window. I keep thinking about that night in the storm, when I was kneeling in the snow, convinced that I was going to die. I was so alone, so desperate. She turned back to face him. But you cared. You stopped. You helped. You gave me a chance to prove what I was capable of. How can I not try to do the same thing for other women? Gregory stood and joined her at the window, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Then we'll do it. We'll start the fund, and we'll help as many women as we can. Julie leaned back against him. Maybe we can be that for other women. The fund they established, which they named the Mountain Women's Initiative, became one of the most successful charitable enterprises in Colorado Territory. Within 2 years, they had helped more than 50 women escape dangerous situations, start businesses, or gain the education and skills they needed to support themselves independently. Julie threw herself into the work with the same passion she brought to everything else, traveling to cities throughout the region to meet with potential beneficiaries, establishing relationships with lawyers and business leaders who could provide additional support. The money is important, she explained to a group of potential donors in Denver. But what these women really need is what I needed, the knowledge that they have value, that they're capable of more than they've been told. It was after one of these fundraising events that Julie brought up another subject that had been on her mind. Gregory, she said, settling back in the comfortable seats of the private rail car they had hired for the journey, I've been thinking about something. Gregory looked up from the business correspondence he had been reviewing. What's that? I want to write a book, Julie said, about what happened to me, about the fund, about the women we've helped. I think there are other people out there who could benefit from hearing these stories. Gregory considered the idea carefully. It would mean making your past public, talking about things that were very painful for you. Are you prepared for that? Julie nodded, her expression determined. I think it's important. There are too many women out there who think they're alone, who think there's no way out of their situations. If my story can help even one of them find the courage to keep fighting, then it's worth it. Then you should write it, Gregory said simply, and I'll support you in whatever way I can. The book, which Julie titled Rising from the Storm, was published 2 years later and became an immediate success. It told the story of her journey from desperate fugitive to successful businesswoman and philanthropist, but it also included the stories of many of the women the fund had helped. The success of the book brought Julie national attention. Invitations to speak at women's colleges and reform organizations, and opportunities to expand the fund's reach even further. But it also brought something she hadn't expected, a visit from Marcus Wheeler. He appeared at their cabin on a cold February morning, alone this time, his appearance much changed from the threatening figure who had burst through their door 3 years earlier. He looked older, worn down, and there was something in his manner that suggested he had come not as an enemy, but as a supplicant. Mrs. Roberts, he said when Julie answered the door, his hat in his hands. I was hoping I could speak with you for a few minutes. Julie studied his face, seeing none of the cold calculation that had once frightened her so much. Gregory appeared behind her, and she felt his solid presence at her back, but she also felt her own strength, the confidence that came from years of proving to herself and the world that she wasn't a victim. What do you want, Mr. Wheeler? She asked, her voice calm and controlled. Wheeler shifted uncomfortably. I wanted to apologize, he said finally, for what I did to you, for the way I treated you. It was wrong, and I've regretted it every day since. Julie felt a mixture of surprise and skepticism. What's changed? Wheeler was quiet for a long moment. My daughter, he said finally. She's about the age you were when I was threatening you. She got into some trouble, and for a while it looked like she might end up in the kind of situation I used to profit from. He looked up, meeting Julie's eyes directly. It made me realize what I had been doing to other people's daughters. I've been trying to make amends ever since. Julie considered his words carefully. The man standing before her bore little resemblance to the threatening figure who had once tried to drag her away from safety, and she found herself feeling something she hadn't expected. Pity. Apology accepted, she said quietly. But Mr. Wheeler, if you're truly sorry for what you did, the best way to make amends is to make sure you never do anything like it again, to anyone. Wheeler nodded eagerly. I've gotten out of that business entirely. I'm trying to run a legitimate operation now. He paused, then added, I read your book, Mrs. Roberts. What you've accomplished is inspiring. I hope someday I can do something half as meaningful. After he left, Julie and Gregory sat by the fire, processing the unexpected encounter. How do you feel? Gregory asked. Julie considered the question carefully. Satisfied, I think. Not because he apologized, though that was nice to hear, but because I realized that I wasn't afraid of him anymore. He couldn't hurt me now, even if he wanted to, because I'm not the same person he once threatened. Gregory smiled, reaching over to take her hand. No, you're not. You're stronger than he ever was. Julie squeezed his hand. We're stronger, she corrected. Everything I've accomplished, everything we've built together, it's because you showed me that I didn't have to face the world alone. And you showed me that the best partnerships are built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Gregory replied. We make a good team, Julie Roberts. Julie smiled, feeling the deep contentment that had become the foundation of her life. Yes, we do, and we're just getting started. 5 years later, as Julie stood on the porch of their expanded cabin, watching the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of gold and rose, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The Mountain Women's Initiative had grown into a national organization, helping hundreds of women across the country. Their mining operation had expanded to become one of the most successful in the West, and their marriage had deepened into the kind of partnership that served as a model for others. But perhaps most importantly, Julie had become the woman she had always had the potential to be. Strong, confident, successful, and committed to using her success to lift others up. She thought of the frightened, desperate woman who had knelt in the snow 5 years ago and felt not shame but compassion for that earlier version of herself. Gregory joined her on the porch, carrying 2 cups of coffee and settling into the chair beside hers. What are you thinking about? He asked. I was thinking about promises, Julie said, about the promise you made me that first day, that I would never have to kneel again. Gregory nodded, remembering. And have you? Had to kneel? Julie considered the question seriously. Not in the way you meant it, not in submission or desperation or defeat, but I've knelt plenty of times since then. To plant flowers in our garden, to comfort a child who was crying, to help women who were where I used to be find their footing. She turned to look at him directly. I've learned that there's a difference between kneeling because you have no choice and kneeling because you choose to serve something larger than yourself. Gregory smiled, understanding immediately. The first kind of kneeling diminishes you. The second kind elevates you. Exactly, Julie said, and I think that's the real gift you gave me, Gregory. Not just the opportunity to stand up, but the knowledge that I could choose when and why and for whom I would kneel. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the world wake up around them. In the distance, they could see the smoke rising from the mining operation. Closer to home, they could see the garden Julie had planted. And between them, they could feel the solid presence of a love that had grown stronger with each passing year. So what's next? Gregory asked. Julie smiled, her hand moving unconsciously to rest on her still flat stomach, where the first signs of their long-awaited child were just beginning to make themselves known. Now we keep building, she said. We raise our children to be strong and kind. We continue to help women who need what we needed, and we remember that the best way to honor the help we've received is to pass it on to others. Gregory reached over and covered her hand with his, and Julie felt the familiar warmth of his touch. And we do it all together, he said. Together, Julie agreed, looking out at the mountains that had witnessed her transformation from victim to survivor to victor. The same peaks that had nearly claimed her life had become the backdrop for a life richer and more meaningful than she had ever dared to imagine. She thought of all the women who would benefit from the programs they had established, all the lives that would be changed because she had been brave enough to risk everything rather than accept defeat. She thought of the children they would raise, who would grow up knowing that strength came not from never falling, but from always getting back up. And she thought of the promise Gregory had made to a desperate woman kneeling in the snow, that she would never have to kneel again. It was a promise he had kept in every way that mattered, not by making her life easy, but by giving her the tools and the confidence to make her own way in the world. The sun was fully up now, bathing the valley in warm golden light, and Julie Roberts stood to face the new day with the same courage and determination that had carried her through the storm and into the life she had built on the other side of it. She would never kneel in desperation again, because she had learned to stand in her own strength, and that she knew was the greatest gift anyone could give or receive.